Agora deu. Agora sim. Boa tarde a todos.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our session here for Q&A. Thank you all for your participation. Just to remind you all that we publish our earnings and documentation on our website in CVM with all of the results about the third quarter and also a video showing all the slides of this presentation with details about each of these initiatives, our results, our cash flow, and our short and long-term visions of the company. First of all, we would like to quickly go over a recap with the main messages we tried to share during the presentation and also during all of our materials. Let's move on with the slides. So to the first slide, let's start off with some accountability here on our plan that we presented on the 10th of August. We had presented a plan that was very bold for 1 billion reais and many different initiatives. And now we're going to bring in some important advances with all of these different initiatives. So first, all of the levers are on time or even being done a little before what was originally planned for our transformation plan. So our business management model is already considering the new levels of margin and cash flows, which is fundamental for our transformation throughout the next quarters. A reduction of the stocks, which took place quicker than what we imagined. From those 1 billion reais, we were able to bring in over 70% already in the third quarter. Our forecast was half in the third one and half in the fourth one. And so reduction of stock also with the SKUs that really generate value, have strong turnovers and good margins. And the total reduction was 1.5 billion if we compare the third quarter of 22 with 23. So we're talking about reaching 90 days. We reached 89 days of stock. We haven't had a worsening, just actually there's an improvement. Stores are very well supplied, and this is fundamental. So we don't have any kind of negative impacts on our sales and stock. So third place, we're really prepared for Black Friday. When we look at the high turnover stock with good quality, it's new and fresh, we're even a little better than in the past. The big reduction was the products that have a lower turnover and a little more age in our stock. So this is very relevant, and the total impact on the cash appears in the next few months, where you have the payment terms for the suppliers. We've reduced this. The third point is the reduction of the 6,000 positions, and so we've already brought in some personnel gains, but the full contribution will take place from the fourth quarter onwards. Marketing expenses with more efficiency, and so here you have efficiency that went up a lot. If we see the marketing investments on the revenue, we reduced this by 30%. So very relevant efficiency gains and focusing on core and what generates value. Important to mention that in some channels in the such as the marketplace, where we reduced investments, they continue to grow, considering the strength of the company's brand and our organic growth as well. We've been really working towards increasing our organic growth and SEOs so we can have a healthier revenue. Then when it comes to reviewing our store footprint, we had 38 store closings, and we already adjusted 3 DCs. And so stores are on time in full, and DCs are taking a little longer, but the rest of the stores will do after Black Friday and Christmas, which are high seasonality periods where we're going to try to burn off some stock and have higher performance. So migrating some of the categories with negative margins from 1P to 3P, that's also on time, and we're migrating to 3P very well without too much of a loss in sales in the third quarter. And then another really important point, which is the launch of the first FIDC by Grupo Casas, Bahia. So this is for the buy now pay later system, the crediário. We filed it on CVM or SEC, and now we already have our pilot project with 5 stores operating in this funding model. It will allow us to migrate with our full bank limits funded through the CDC to FIDC throughout time. So we're going to be working on the rollouts to all of the stores, and we should be operating this full first quarter onwards. So then the reduction of 405 million, considering the monthly seasonality, will already be migrated to
Destaco aqui também a monetização de
providing a
ativos
lot of
tributários, que
flexibility by
continua
the lead manager of the
conforme
company. Also,
vinha
the
nos outros
monetization
trimestres,
of
veio até um
some
pouquinho melhor, 663 milhões
tax
foi a monetização
issues, and
aqui nesse
it was
trimestre.
about
Fizemos um
636
follow-on de
million, which was a
622
net,
milhões de reais, importante aí para
a
esses
follow-on
desafios
also
de curto prazo, então que deram
622 reais,
fôlego para a
which is important
companhia
for the
e
short-term
permitiu a
time
gente
because it gave
terminar com a
us some
mesma
room
posição de caixa do trimestre
to
anterior,
continue with the same
mesmo
cash
com a redução dos
previous
limites de
quarter,
CDCI,
even with
que
the
foram
reduction
feitas pelos
of the
bancos lá no início do
CDCI
ano, né? Mas você vai perdendo o
with
limite à medida
banks
que
in the
você vai
past,
pagando
and
a amortização
using this as
daqueles,
you
daquelas
pay the
ações de crediário que
amortization
foram feitas ano
of
passado, prazo médio de 14 meses. Então, ao longo dos meses, você vai
transactions
pagando o
with an
antigo e
average
não
price
entra
of
um
14
novo
months, and
daqueles bancos que
over the
cortaram o
months you
limite. Então,
pay the
isso aqui,
old ones, you don't
parte
have
da
any ones with
redução
the banks that
de
cut down the
caixa
limits.
nosso, né,
So
é operacional e
um,
parte é essa
part of
redução de
this
limites, mais ou menos meio a meio.
is
O
operational, and
CAPEX
part of
já
this is a
conseguimos
reduction of
ajustar o
the
nosso plano
limits.
de
So the
investimento, então
capex,
conseguimos
we've
fazer
already
uma
been able to
redução
adjust in our investment
importante, mais
plan.
de
We had a
60% de
reduction
redução
that
no
was very
CAPEX, e é um
significant, over
CAPEX sustentável para a
60%.
companhia quando a gente
And
pensa
this is a
em torno
sustainable
de
capex
400
for the
milhões de
company. When
reais
you think
que a gente
about
comunicou no
400
mesmo
million
pique que
reais
estava
that we
antigamente.
communicated
Isso aqui
instead of
é
1
bem
billion we were spending
sustentável para
previously,
focar no
and
core da companhia,
this is
focar
super
bastante em
sustainable to
UX,
focus on
em
the company's
SEO e também
core,
em alguns processos
UX,
logísticos que
SEO,
são, sem
and
dúvida
some
nenhuma, uma
other
grande
logistical
competitiva para
optimizations
permitir o
that are
crescimento da
definitely
companhia.
going to be a
E
competitive
reconhecimento
advantage to allow
importante
for the
pela
company's growth.
19ª vez
And
consecutiva,
another bit of
a gente foi
important
reconhecido com a marca
recognition,
Casas
which
Bahia,
was
reconhecida como top of mind em
the
lojas
Casas
de
Bahia
móveis
brand as
eletrodomésticos pela
total
Folha. Então,
top of
é um
mind in
reconhecimento bastante
home
importante que reforça o
appliances
valor
and
da marca e todo o
stores. So that's
potencial
really
da
strong
companhia.
recognition, reinforcing the
Dito isso,
company's
reforço que o ano está andando
brand,
bem. Eu pulo
brand
para o próximo slide para
potential.
trazer aqui o principal
And
foco da companhia.
having said
Esse
that, the
slide,
plan's
no
moving
fluxo de
along well.
caixa
So the main
direto,
focus of the
a gente
company
colocou um
with
demonstrativo para
the
todo mundo poder
indirect
acompanhar
cash
a
flow,
transformação e os
we brought in this
impactos do plano de
demonstration so everyone
transformação
can
do
keep
fluxo de
up with
caixa,
the
os impactos do
transformation
nosso
and
plano
the
aqui no
cash
fluxo
flow
de caixa da
transformation
companhia.
process,
Lembrando que
its
todo o
impacts on our
norte das
plans
nossas ações, os
and the cash flow
objetivos
of the company.
desse
So all of
primeiro ano de
the
trabalho, eles são
objectives of this
voltados
first
para
year of
melhorar
work
o fluxo de caixa.
are really
Quando a gente
focused on
olha o fluxo de
improving our
caixa
cash
das
flows.
operações, né,
When you
ele
look
vem
at this
positivo,
cash
392
flow,
milhões de reais.
uh,
A gente tem que pegar todas
it's
as atividades de
positive.
arrendamento, tirar também a parte de capex nossa, e você chega no
We
fluxo
also
livre. E o que é o nosso objetivo? É o fluxo de caixa livre acima do pagamento de
here
juros.
we have the free
Então, é
cash
isso que o
flow.
plano de transformação vai trazer. E aí, obviamente, tem outras alavancas
This
para
is
fazer
what the
geração de
transformation
valor. Mas o
plan
primeiro objetivo é
is
trazer
bringing in,
break-even aqui.
and
Então,
the
quando a
first
gente olha
objective
para o resultado do trimestre,
is
nós
to
temos
bring
bastante
in the break even.
consciência
So
dos
when we look at
desafios de
the
curto
quarter, we're
prazo da
super
companhia
aware of
e
the
temos um plano
challenges that
robusto
we
para
have in
transformar
short
esse
term,
fluxo de caixa.
and
Falando
we have
nesse
this
plano
robust
robusto, vamos pular
plan
para
to
o próximo
transform
slide,
this cash flow. And as
que
we
a
talk
gente
about
fala
this
do plano de
robust plan,
transformação. Aqui, lembrando,
we're
no
going to
dia
be
10 de agosto,
discussing
nós
the
apresentamos essa
transformation
primeira
plan.
coluna,
And
ali
so
do 10 de
on the
agosto, do
10th of
impacto total
August,
de 1
presented
bilhão
the
de
first
reais
column and the total
no
impact
LAIR,
of
né, na
1 billion
base do
reais
EBIT da companhia.
in the
E agora nós estamos
EBIT of
trazendo
the company.
novas alavancas
And
que somam mais
now we're bringing in new
460
levers
milhões
that
de
will
reais.
add
Temos
up
quase
to another
500 milhões de
460
reais.
million.
Aqui tem várias
So
alavancas menores, tá? Mas duas
here we
alavancas
have some
grandes
other
que eu gostaria de destacar.
smaller levers, but two
Primeiro,
big
penetração
important
de
ones I want to
serviços.
highlight,
A parte de
which is
serviços, a
first
gente tem garantia
penetration of
estendida, seguro de
services.
furto
As
e
I
roubo, a
mentioned,
parte de
extended
instalação dos
warranty,
eletrodomésticos. Isso tem uma
insurance,
margem
and
muito boa.
installation,
Nós
home
fizemos um
appliances.
piloto
This has a really
para
good margin. So
verificar, né, as melhores
we had this
práticas de venda,
pilot
de
to
conversão desses
verify
serviços,
what are the
e
best
agora nós estamos
practices for
replicando para
sales
algumas
and
lojas
conversions.
e encontramos um
And now we're
potencial
going
ainda
to
está
be
longe de ser o potencial
replicating the
máximo da
stores.
companhia, mas é o
It's
potencial da
far
gente
from being the
trazer
full
todo mundo com a
potential of the
penetração um
company, but
pouquinho melhor
we
do
want
que
to
está
bring in
agora,
the
e a
situation
gente consegue gerar 200 milhões a mais de
and then we'll be
receita
able to generate about 200 million more in
com
revenue
serviços, que será bastante
with the
importante para o
services
nosso
that
lucro,
it's
tá?
going to be
Então
very
aqui,
important
muito
for our
importante, quando olha para o
EBIT.
custo variável,
So here,
a gente, esse
on
custo
variable
mais é o que fica para a
cost,
companhia, tá? Então ele
this is
praticamente chega lá
what's
no
left to the
fica nos
company.
impostos.
So
Custos variáveis, a gente também tem
almost
uma
what
alavanca
reaching
importante,
the
que é a
EBIT
revisão dos
except for
contratos
the
indiretos.
taxes, right?
Então
Then
nós
you have
fizemos
the revision
workshops
of the
revisando todos os
indirect
contratos
contracts. We
indiretos
had
da
some
companhia
workshops
e
reviewing all
agora
the
implantamos também uma
indirect
torre de
contracts.
controle
Now we deploy
permanente para avaliar
the
todas as
permanent
operações de
control
compra.
tower to
Então a gente
assess all of
centralizou a
the
emissão de decisão de compra, tinha muita
RFPs.
gente que tinha acesso
So we
à decisão de compra,
centralized
agora são
this. We had a lot
duas
of people
pessoas para a
that could
diretoria,
create
então de uma a
RFPs.
três
Now we
pessoas
have
para a
less people
diretoria,
that can do
e
this, like
todas as
one to three
aquisições acima de 100 mil
people
reais passam por um
per
comitê,
board,
onde tem
and
membros do
all of those that
C-Level lá
are go
para
over budget authorized. We have members of the C-level in this committee to assess if this RFP is really necessary. And if you have an objection, when we have a report sent to me and I can veto some of these hires that I don't think are relevant for the committee at this moment. We have a lot of opportunities and we're being quite conservative. We have a reduction in these indirect costs as well. So over time, the full capturing of these levers will probably take place around the end of 2024. So as we cancel these contracts, we'll have some renewals as well, and most of them you have to wait for the contract to finish, so you don't pay fines, and then you bring in major savings. Having said this, I want to mention a really interesting point. We're in November, we have Black Friday going on. We're just missing a few days, and then we have a really interesting shift when we talk about reinforcing Casas Bahia to focus on core and this total dedication to community and what the impact would be for the campaign of this brand shift. It was a huge impact. Our team's super engaged. I want to invite you all to visit our stores. Besides the unforgettable conditions, you'll see the level of engagement, energy, and the connection to customers, which was impressive. The amount of messages, people seeing the company more, although it's the same, because there's this total dedication to you, which already provides this connection. And Grupo Casas Bahia is already connected to the brand's level of stock. I've already talked about that long, so the store's really full of products. We're going to have a Black Friday. It's going to be great. We'll be exploring all of the omnichannel advantages, and the main difference is that all of retail is more rational, considering the macroeconomic challenges, and we don't have this excessive stock issue. So when you look at the issue last Black Friday, sales were really high because there's a point in time when you have to sell. But we're not at the level yet, and we've already burned off the excessive balance, and we have a healthy stock. So it'll be more rational. We have important advantages, and we'll bring of sales and incentives. Pretty good Friday, but it's going to be rash where you look income statements, positive margins, and actually generate back. So it's going to be great. And of course, we always have to look at the fourth quarter with the first quarter. It's great, but in the first quarter, so coming into profitability with Black Friday, we're excited. So and we've already launched it today on TV. It's again for Black Friday. So we're talking about our short-term vision here, and here we're getting to Q&A. What we want to reinforce. Very robust this plan, so we want to reach 2 billion plan to allow for simplification and execution, because 1.5 billion is enough to find positive free cash flow. And then, of course, we'll bring in other levers in 2025, and the company will search for possibilities to really be a reference when it comes to ROI and reach. So the transformation plan is doing very well. Even a little better than what I expected, with possibility to advance a bit more on certain levels. Second point, we have a lot of support from the management team, so we're aware of the short-term challenges. You saw the cash flow, we have this cash flow that's pretty good. And we have some liability challenges. And all these are part of our plans, which are really in line with these current institutions. When we talk more about the end of 2024, we're already searching for profitability that's in line with our long-lasting sustainability, allowing for us to, in 25, deliver profitability that's really good and a good return on invested capital, and that this is really good upsides when it comes to allowing for some investments. So our focus here is really concentrated in the short term. So I want to highlight that there is a possibility for some targets, and so some levers are doing a little better. It's could maybe before, and so maybe that could be a little better. We're trusting on our confidence in this transformation plan and our strong alliance also with our suppliers and partners that have really been leveraging our sales, and we're going to be leveraging core levers. And so these are really good, and we're going to be able to really position ourselves even more in these years. And then, of course, we have cash flow. that's what we're very confident about. And that, of course, we can start reaping the rewards of this transformation plan at the end of 2020. So thank you all for your presence. And now we'll begin with the Q&A session. And we also have Sergio, our investor relations, Elsie, our CFO, and Gabriel, our investor relations head, to be able to answer any questions. Thank you all so much. Gabriel, can you gather those questions? Yeah, okay, good afternoon, everyone. My first question is from Pedro from Bradesco, and Pedro, you may proceed.
Agora foi, eu acho, né? Valeu,
Oh,
turma.
I think it
Obrigado
moved.
por pegar minha pergunta, tá? Valeu pela apresentação, Renato. Bom falar com
Thanks
você.
for the
Aqui eu tenho
presentation.
duas perguntas rápidas do meu lado, né? Uma mais, enfim, mais
We have
macro, outra
two
mais ampla
questions.
aqui. A primeira que eu queria saber é entender um pouco do
The
apetite do
first one
consumidor
is
de cada um dos
about
setores, né?
the
A
type
gente,
for the
enfim, já teve
consumers of the core
passados esses
categories.
primeiros 40 dias aí
After these do
quarto
first 40
trimestre, né? Não
days
sei,
in our fourth
queda de
quarter,
juros na ponta, né? Se
with
a
a
gente já
drop
vê
in the
algum
interest
impacto, né?
rates,
Com poder de ticket mais alto, mais
do you see any
dependência de
kind of
crédito,
impact
mesmo a gente
with higher
entrando agora
tickets
diante
and
do
more
Black Friday,
dependent
se a
on
gente já
credit?
sente algum
Um,
o sentimento
and
melhorando
so
aqui, tá? Essa
if you
é a
feel
primeira
like
pergunta.
anything
E a
getting
segunda
better,
é um
that's the first
pouco
question.
sobre essa dinâmica de caixa no quarto
And
tri, né? A
then
gente
a
viu
bit of the
alguns avanços
cash
importantes
dynamic
nesse
in the
plano de
fourth quarter.
transformação
So we saw some
no terceiro
important
tri. A gente sabe
advances
que é assim
in the
como você falou, um
transformation
ciclo
plan.
sazonalmente mais forte, né?
We
Nesse
know
período
it's
de
a little
venda de
shorter
working cap aqui. Não sei se tem alguma coisa a
when
ser
it comes to the
monetizada também.
dynamic
Então,
for
se
working
você puder dar alguma
capital.
cor sobre a trajetória
And so
aqui
if you could give us some color
de caixa no curto prazo, seria legal também.
of
Obrigado,
the
pessoal.
cash in the short term, that would be great.
Pronto. Opa, voltou.
So,
Desculpa aí
yeah, okay, and I think now we're back. So, Pedro,
Obrigado aí pelas perguntas.
audio, but thanks for the questions. First of all, we still don't have this feeling of like an improvement in demand when we actually show you the impact on sales in the third quarter and the market share. When you see that, we continue to share month over month, but even with stores being very resilient, kind of keeping up the volume of sales and online losing sales. So when you look at the core categories, demand continues very pressured and not much of a perspective on improvement in the short term. So we have a transformation plan considering this bad scenario, and this is confirming itself. And our expectations are to see some kind of an improvement in the second semester of 2024. We have no perspectives of improvements from a macro perspective when it comes to credits for consumers. So of course, a drop in interest rates helps, and so this helps also to unleash the pineapple a little more and maximize these sales. But from a demand perspective, we still see the same kind of scenario in properties, home appliances, furniture, and it's all very pressured. Now, they asked us to give us a little color on the fourth quarter. What we've seen is we want to use 2023 to improve processes. So we even had some provisions that are maybe a little more conservative than what we could have in a normal scenario because we don't want to have any risks in 2024. So it's a better quarter, as you mentioned. There's a favorable seasonality. We have Christmas and everything. So it is better. Then from a margin perspective, it's not going to be a reference necessarily, but we do have some write-offs and we have the impact of the costs. We have 30% of the balance that will still be sold in the fourth quarter. Black Friday will use for some opportunities for adjustments, where we also have some additional discounts. And when we look at the fourth quarter, it's still not so concerning with the income statement of the company. We're just concerned about the cash flow. But we do start seeing some improvements in the cash. The cash reduction was very significant, and we will continue to have some improvements to the company to begin in a very positive way. So it is a very important step to help organize things, start off at another pace. And it's important to mention that we're talking
valores,
about a
44
very
bi
big
de
company.
GMV, assim, é uma
So
companhia
we have
vice sem loja,
44
você não
billion,
transforma a companhia em um
and
trimestre.
you don't
São
transform the
alguns
company in a
trimestres
single
para fazer
quarter.
esse plano. Por
So
isso
we
que a gente
have to
chamou
have
o
a
plano,
few
lembra que a gente chamava o
quarters.
plano de Via
That's why
2025,
we call it
que agora
the
é a Casas
Bahia
Bahia
2025
2025, mas é um plano
Now it's
onde a
Casas
gente vai
Bahia
transformando
2025,
a
but
companhia
it's
até
a
o
plan
final
where
de
we're going to transform the
2024, para
company
aí sim
till the end of
concluir que sim,
2024
a nossa visão
to have
é buscar ser
a
referência em
2025
retornos sobre
where our vision
investimento no
is to
varejo.
be a
Então a gente
reference
quer
when it
se
comes
encontrar
to
bem arrumado. Para
return on
isso a gente
invested
quer
capital.
apresentar
So we really want to
tudo que
start off
puder
there.
consertar agora em 23,
And
para
whatever we can
24 ficar
fix
mais
up
limpo e aí
now,
sim começar a ter trimestres
we'll
pelo menos mais
do.
limpos, ainda não com benefício na
Then we'll have
totalidade do plano
some
de
cleaner
transformação, mas mais
quarters.
limpos. E aí fica mais fácil de comparar primeiro TRI de
Um,
24 com o primeiro TRI de 23 e ver a
that'll
evolução
make it a lot
do
easier.
segundo TRI com o segundo TRI, sem necessidade de
So
reforma,
the
sem
first
necessidade de
one
ajuste
and
nenhum,
then the
que a
second
gente exclui
quarter without
se
a
são
need for
recorrentes. Então,
adjustments where we
o
would
nosso foco no quarto TRI
exclude these
é terminar de
non-recurring
arrumar a
items.
casa e, obviamente,
And our
poder
focus
acelerar a
is
venda onde a gente
to,
pode acelerar, mas muito foco em arrumar a
and
casa, em trazer essa
a big
disciplina para a gente
focus
entrar em
on
24 sim
fixing
com
things up and
isso
having more
na
discipline
mesa
in
e aí
2024
continuando
without any kind of
bem
risks,
confiante com esse plano.
and then
Obrigado.
continuing the plan that we're very confident about. Thanks.
Obrigado, Pedro. Nossa próxima
Thank you,
pergunta é
Pedro.
do Nicolas,
Now
do
our
JP
next
Morgan.
question is from
Nico, por
Nicholas
favor.
of JP Morgan. Nico, please.
Obrigado, Suca. Obrigado, Renato, por pegar nossa
Thanks,
pergunta.
Sukar. Thank you, Renato, for taking our
Eu tenho duas, na
question.
verdade. Você falou, Renato, que
We have
vocês
two
já estão
actually. Renato,
implementando
you talked
algumas
about how
iniciativas
you're
no plano
already
da
deploying
reestruturação e você
many
disse que algumas
initiatives in the
coisas têm sido
restructuring plan, and you also
mais
talked
fáceis
about
de ser
some things
implementadas
that were
ao
maybe a
longo do
little
tempo.
easier to deploy
Então, se você
over
conseguir
time.
mapear ou
And I want to know
identificar
if you were
pontos
able to
parecidos
map
no
this
plano que
out
talvez
or
seria bom
identify any
mencionar ou
additional
alguma
risks
coisa
in the
que tenha
plan that
sido
you
mais
should mention,
difícil de
or
executar dentro
something that maybe was a
do
little more
plano médico,
difficult
né?
to execute with
E a segunda
the
pergunta,
plan.
do lado dos
And my
fornecedores,
second
como
question
que tem
is from a
evoluído as
supplier
conversas agora
perspective.
que a Via
How
está
has
tá rodando como
these
com um
conversations
número assim, um pouquinho
evolved
menor
now that
ou bastante menor que
VIA
o
has a
estabelecido
structure level that's a lot lower
no
than
passado, né? Obrigado.
what it had in the
Vamos lá,
past?
Nicolas.
Thank you
Do ponto
very
de vista de
much.
risco, de
Well,
complexidade, né,
Nico,
a nossa
from
alavanca
a
mais
risk and
complexa
complexity
que a gente
perspective, the
tinha
most complex
era o
lever
FDIC, né? Então,
that
o
we
FDIC,
had
quando a gente
was
falou
the
de lançar,
FIDC.
muita gente, quando a gente colocou o nosso cronograma
When we talked about
de
launching
adoção, por
it,
exemplo, era um cronograma
a lot of
muito apertado.
people,
Assim, a gente precisou mudar
we
sistema,
had a
mudar
very tight
correspondente bancário em
schedule.
todas as lojas, garantia critério de fungibilidade, né, para a
Um,
gente não ter realmente o dinheiro que entra,
so
cai
there
na
was
loja, cai no caixa do FDIC,
we
não no
would
caixa da
so the
companhia,
cash coming
para
in
realmente
at
para os
the
bancos
FIDC
e para os
level,
investidores terem um FDIC bastante seguro.
so that we can have an FIDC
Acho
that's
que foi o
really
maior
safe.
desafio que a gente
And
teve aqui,
so this was the
do ponto de
biggest
vista de complexidade.
challenge
Foi
we had
muito bem
here.
executado pelo
From a
time, com
complexity
parceria da
perspective, it was
BTG,
really
para a gente
well
conseguir montar um
implemented by the
FDIC
team with the
que
partnership
hoje eu acho que
with
ele é
BTG, and we
referência
were
no
able to set
mercado
up
do
an
ponto de
FIDC
vista de
that's currently a
critérios
reference in
de
the market
segurança, de
when it
fungibilidade, a
comes
gente
to
trazia ainda muita coisa
criteria
de prevenção de fraude,
and
mais
bringing in a
critério de
lot of fraud
elegibilidade para o
prevention
crédito, a gente ter
aspects,
mais
more
disciplina ainda
criteria
em
for
governança,
even more
na
discipline
disponibilização de
and
crédito. Hoje a gente já tem
governance
um histórico
and the
muito
availability
positivo,
of credit.
mas isso tende a
Since we
trazer até
already
uma
have this very
performance um
positive
pouquinho melhor para o
history,
nosso
which would bring
crediário,
in performance
além
that's even a
da
little
questão do
better
funding. E
to our
uma
buy now, pay
segurança para o
later,
investidor.
besides the
Essa eu acho
funding
que estava o
issues
maior
and
desafio
also
nosso, foi
safety
onde a
for
gente
investors.
perdeu
That was the
mais
biggest
tempo
risk,
para poder
which
acertar
is
tudo que
where
tinha que
we
acertar para a gente poder
wasted
ter
a bit
um
more
novo FDIC.
time
Agora
on
está bem
getting everything
encaminhado,
right
a
so we
gente
could
tem
have
que
a good
pilotar e
FIDC, and
garantir que não
now
vai
things
ter
are
nenhum erro de
progressing very
sistema.
well,
A
and
gente
we
começou
should
o piloto ontem
guarantee that
e
we
a
have
gente
no
vai medir isso
mistakes
para
or
ver se tem que
errors on the
ajustar alguma
system.
coisa.
And then
Diz que existe
we'll have to measure this
se
and see
tiver
if we
algum
need to
ajuste,
adjust
sempre vou
things.
ter um
But
freeze de Black
if
Friday, um
there's
freeze
any
de Natal, onde eu não posso
adjustments, like
subir
a freeze and
novas
Black
coisas em
Friday, or
produção, eu
that where
posso,
it
se
can't
tiver
have
que
more
ajustar alguma
stuff
coisa,
being
a gente tentou, já fizemos
put
o
on
teste
for
para não
production
ter.
if we need to
Mas se
adjust, maybe
tiver,
we
ele
could have
acaba
some
atrasando um
tests done.
pouquinho
But
mais para
if
poder
necessary, it's going to
complementar
kind
e
of get
acelerar o
them in the
rollout
way
para
a bit
todas as
more
lojas. O
to be
cronograma
able
básico
to
seria em
fix
janeiro
and
já estar com
accelerate
quase
the
todas
rollout
as
to all of
lojas
the
já
stores. But I hope that in
operando
January we'll
e
have all of the
que vai
stores
permitir a
operating
gente migrar mais
with
rápido
the
para poder ser
FIGC
isso aqui.
financial instrument,
Se
which will
atrasar
allow
um
us
pouco,
to
a gente vai acabar
migrate a little
demorando um
quicker. If
pouco
it gets a
mais
little
para
later,
poder migrar,
will
pode
take
ser
a bit
fevereiro,
longer
acho que é um
to be.
risco que
It
tem
could
na
be
mesa. Do ponto
February.
de
It's
vista
a
mais
risk that we have
estrutural,
to look at.
e aí não das
And from a
alavancas
structural
propriamente ditas,
perspective,
o risco que a gente
levers,
tem é realmente a desalavancagem
the
operacional da
risk
companhia.
is
Então a gente tem
really
que
the
trabalhar
operational averaging. So we must work to make this all take place and improve our cash flow, and then keeping the relevance of the company in the core categories. When we continue to gain share and the market's pressured, that's going to be less of a structural impact. When things get back, we'll be able to capture even more growth. So that's going to help us. But then in the short term, we must measure rupture and losses because the discipline went into our stock with the opportunity to optimize risk, mix, sorry, shipping in a lot of impacts, and we need to monitor this to not have any additional ruptures. Things are moving along well, under control. We're aware of the risks. We create daily monitoring of the risks so we can go through them, performing things well. I think the team has been demonstrating excellent capacity for execution. That makes me very confident that we're on track and that we'll really be able to have this big transformation over the next quarters. Great. Thank you, Nico.
Quando põe no mudo, não consegue tirar de novo. Então, melhor quem está perguntando deixar sem mudo, se for replicar.
A próxima pergunta, Renato,
Our next
é do João.
Renato is from João from Citibank. João, you may proceed. Okay, thanks, Gabriel. Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to explore this opportunity here with this question on the FIDC. And Renato, what does this bring in as opportunities? It's very transformational for the company, right? We have this new funding source to provide credit to consumers. I understand that there's a process that's really interesting because you migrate the CDCI to the FIDC. And so I want to hear about the opportunities to capture sales through this new source of funding. And I want to understand, once you keep about subordination and you're saying that you have a potential to reach 1.5 billion in the FIDC, what would be the resources that you would be able to, that you would need to keep the 20% subordination? And then I want to hear about cash generation also and talk about the net situation of the tax assets you had. So before you accumulated things, it kind of offsetted things and you didn't really see the monetization. So I want to actually hear about this and how this took place. Did you have to sell some assets, some tax assets, and what should we look at in the future? And then finally, sorry for going over time here, but I want to just mention, when do you think there's enough cash to pay off the rest of the debt? Okay, thank you, João. Great questions. And we'll start off with number one about the FIDC benefits. It's kind of what you mentioned. But after Elsie, we'll talk about this. It's, of course, a new way for us to capture businesses. We have 4 billion from banks, which are corporate credits with the Casas Bahia risk. We're funding high quality later, but for him, Casas Bahia, when you migrate this to an FIDC, the first thing that happens is flexibility with the banks to increase duration, reduce capital costs, and even bring in some flexibility to have additional resources to reinforce working capital, since we'll have a more conservative cash policy. So there's a huge benefit. And from a sales perspective, as you mentioned, we are losing currently some sales, so there's still room about 250 million in sales in the buy now pay later. Of course, a little more, and if we consider the potential, it's a lot greater. So we're being more conservative in our credit discipline. Where do we want to grow? We want to grow in pre-approved, in the best rating we have, where the rates are a little lower, profitability is a little lower, but the risks are practically zero. So it's a lot better than growing where the profit is really good, but you have a lot more risk depending on the variation in macro scenarios and economic conditions of those customers. So we do see a potential to sell more and penetrate more, especially in categories that suffered more, which were properties, which furniture, where we have a big penetration and major leadership, but that dropped a lot from a perspective of market demand due to access to credit. And consumers are postponing this when they're not in a comfortable position, there's not available credit. So the sum of low interest with FIDC funding will allow us to get back to growing in furniture and increasing our share. It's going to be very important for the company's margin. Now I'll let Elsie talk about the monetization aspects and then also about the cash flow of your third question here. We have a plan that in the second quarter of 24 we'll already be covering this. So when we look at cash burn in 23 and the free cash flow minus payment of interest, which is our main target, in 23 pretty big. We look at 24, it's already going to be a lot smaller. So our forecasts are like situation we're in 24, it's still negative, but we have a more positive end of the year, and then we start generating cash from 24 to 25. We have some transformations really such as our labor legacy liabilities and other things that add up to over 1 billion reais in 2025, regardless of our execution. It's just about the maturity timing that it's already on track. So we expect that we'll have a second semester that's really different, and we're already operating at another level. So we'll have other discussions of cool stuff going on that we're still keeping in the oven, so that whenever it's the right moment, we'll be able to accelerate with. Elsie, if you want to get into more details and bring in a little more on the FIDCs. Are you on mute? Well, we can't open up our mic. So, host, can you please open up our mic? Okay. Hey guys, thank you for the question. And so I wanted to read some points here from Renato, and then I'll get into just some FIDC information, as you mentioned. With like 5 billion, it's going to allow for credit limits. That's really important to highlight that the profitability of the FIDC remains with the company with these subordinate quotas. So all the difference in the spread we have between what we have versus the funding costs and fall and losses remain with the company. So that's really positive in our results, and you don't have any kind of change in regards to this unless you're going to flexibilize or provide additional growth that we can achieve. But what I want to mention about the FIDC that's also very important is the structure that was built in, which mentions it could be the model. We considered and dedicated a lot of time and effort. Time was actually short, but a lot of effort from all of the teams for structuring IT, the store teams as well. So that first of all, what's important is that we should not modify the processes. They need to be very transparent to our sales team and customers. We want to change the level of sales. We want to increase actually this within new processes. And the FIDC structures are very robust to address risks, as Renato mentioned. For a lot of people, pay their bills in cash at the store, so it's super important to have this structure for a bank correspondent in our 1,100 stores, that whenever customers are going to pay in cash, he can have already write off this on the FIDC. So we already considered this backing this up, and this also gives us some legal safety as well, and that's really significant. So we have like a digital biometrics for 100% of the cases that will also reduce this substantially when it comes to fraud. So these are different phases and levels of protection and safety from different aspects that we're really comfortable when we consider the deployment of this FIDC. It's going to segregate the corporate risks and receivable risks, which is really important. So we need to reduce these 5 billion of exposure and corporate risk that we have with the banks. And see, it's not like Casas Bahia is going to the capital market. Actually, here it's the risks that's in the FIDC, and you guys know this a lot better than we do, but we actually reduce our exposure of credit as a whole again, in a broad way. So that's very positive and creates more flexibility for us. Then the second topic about cash generation is we really added a lot of strength and efforts on our tax teams to monetize and consider that we have a lot of tax assets, as you noticed, that we're growing over the time. And so especially for ICMS, and we had its effort already being taking place with even more emphasis to see what we could do to accelerate this monetization, because once again, I think it's part of our transformation plan to consider this and we can monetize this to be able to perform this plan. So this is an important initiative, and we continue to monetize this with the carve-outs and sales to third parties. And we have the second part of logistical and tax operations and how we can optimize these issues in our logistical model with something that we can complete as a whole. I think it's important also because we have this third point that also helps a lot. We talk about stocks a lot, such as cash generation, etc. And it brings this benefit at a collateral level that's very positive because we buy less, and so we have less credit taken and we sell more, and that accelerates our debit. So by the actual nature of the operation and reduction of the stocks, this will lead to additional monetization here on our spread. So I think it's a set of things. There's not like a single initiative. We'll continue to accelerate, of course, maybe not at the same magnitude at this aspect, but we'll continue to search for efficiency. We were able to achieve 1.5 billion in the last 12 months, and we're going to try to still search for testing the operational efficiency, looking at the level of ruptures, because we also don't want this. But whatever we can optimize in the working capital as a whole is clearly going to be observed here.
Obrigado, Elcio. Obrigado.
Okay, perfect.
Valeu.
Thank you, Elcio. Thank you,
Obrigado,
Renato.
Elcio. Nossa próxima pergunta
Thank
é da
you. Next
Daniela
question is from Danny Yeager at XP.
Boa
Danny,
tarde,
you may
pessoal.
proceed.
Obrigada por pegar minha pergunta.
Nicholas,
Eu
thanks for
tenho
taking my
duas. A primeira em
question.
relação ao cenário
Actually, I have
competitivo. Eu
two.
queria ouvir de
The question is
vocês
about the
como vocês
competitive
têm
scenario, and I want
visto
to
essa
make you guys.
dinâmica, tanto dos players talvez mais parecidos com
And
vocês no
so,
sortimento, como também
about the
novos membros
players,
entrantes, né,
also
nessa
when it
questão
comes
do
to the
1P.
assortment
A gente tem
and the
visto o
new
Mercado Livre
players,
participando mais ativamente do 1P, a
we have
própria
seen
Amazon
the
também
Mercado
fazendo
Livre,
alguns movimentos mais
Amazon
enfáticos aí
also working on some
nesse
other
sentido
more
também. Então,
emphatic
como vocês têm
movements in this
sentido um
sense
pouco
as well.
esse
So,
cenário?
how have you felt
E
this
uma segunda,
scenario?
até
And
baseada na
also the
notícia que
second
saiu, né,
point,
ontem sobre a
based on
saída das
on the
categorias
news
23,
that
eu
came
acho, se não
out
me engano, eram
yesterday about
23
the 1P
cidadas na
categories, I think
matéria.
there were
Primeiro, se
23
essas 23
mentioned in
já
the
foi feito um
article,
ajuste ou se
and
tem mais
have these 23
categorias que
already
vocês
performed
pretendem,
adjustments with,
mapearam sair.
or are there
E
more
também como
categories
que
that you
isso se
plan to map
encaixa em
out
termos de estratégia da companhia
and how
como
this would
proposta
fit
de
in
valor mesmo,
when it
se
comes to the
a
company's
ideia é vocês
strategy as
focarem
a
mais
value
em 1P e aí
proposition?
ser omni, né,
Do you think you're
tanto
going to focus
com
more
as
on
lojas como
1P and be
no
more
online, e aí o
omni-channel
3P talvez
with the
perdendo um
stores,
pouquinho de
and
relevância, enfim,
maybe
como que é essa
3P would lose a
estratégia do
bit of
que a
relevance?
companhia
How do you
quer
imagine
ser,
this
e aí também em
strategy
termos
of
de
what the company wants to
posicionamento
be,
versus os
and
demais.
also when it
Obrigada.
comes to the
Boa, Dani. Obrigado pela
positioning
pergunta.
versus
A
others?
gente está vendo um
Okay, thank you
cenário
for the question.
competitivo
We're
bastante
seeing this
racional,
competitive
tá? Acho que
scenario
ninguém está em
that's very
condições de
rational.
fazer
I think
grandes
no one
apostas,
can
está todo mundo sendo um pouco mais
perform like
racional.
major bets.
Obviamente,
Everyone's
né,
being
o
a
que
lot more
nos
rational.
impacta
But of
mais são as
course,
plataformas
what
genéricas.
impacts us
Elas
more
estão
are not the
começando e sendo
generic
vocais, já
platforms.
tiveram
They
movimentos de vir,
are
voltar, vir,
starting off.
voltar.
We already had some
Obviamente,
movement
Black
coming.
é um momento
Of course,
onde
Black
se vende
is
bastante
a
as
moment where
categorias
you
core,
sell
né?
a
E
lot of
aquelas
our
de maior valor
category.
agregado é que a
So
pessoa
the items that
espera
have the greatest added value,
quando
where
tem uma
people wait
mudança no volume
for
de
Black
carrinho de
Friday to be
celular
able
na
to buy.
Black.
So you don't have like a big
Agora, de
shift
telefone
in
de
this
telas
volume, but
de
from
linha
phones
branca,
and
por exemplo, isso tem
screens and all of
bastante
that,
volume na Black.
then you have
Então,
a lot of
chama atenção
volumes
para
as well.
todo mundo
So
anunciar
this
desse
does
jeito.
call our
Acho que as
attention when you
estratégias de
announce it like
manter ninguém
this.
que
So I think
esteja
the
ainda
strategies, we
consistente
still don't
e
see
fazer isso
someone
que
having such a
incomoda
consistent
na
strategy,
categoria core.
and that's something that
A competição
gets
com
in
os
the
players
way in the
regionais
core
e com
categories.
o
So the
player
competition with the
varejista
player
que
region,
também tem
with the regional
loja
players and the
física nas
retailers
categorias core, tem
that
sido
also have
racional tanto no
omnichannels
parcelamento
has
quanto nas
been
condições
rational
comerciais.
in
Então, acho que a gente está
e-commerce
todo mundo na mesma
conditions,
página.
and
Quando a gente
that
olha
we're all
para
on the
as
same
mudanças de categorias, a
page.
gente tinha
And when
falado
we
isso,
look
né, que a
at
gente apresentou lá desde
a
agosto,
shift in
assim, que eram
categories,
23 categorias.
when we
No slide lá no
presented,
plano está bem claro que são
we have the
23 categorias.
20 some
Ticket
categories,
médio
or 23,
mais baixo, então que é realmente um perfil de plataforma
a
generalista,
lower
e a
average
gente
ticket,
migrou para o 3P. Então, produtos de limpeza,
and we
bebidas,
migrated to 3P.
itens gerais que a gente migrou para lá. A gente não vê
And
outros
some
players
other
migrando para
general
o 3P.
items
E
we
aí, que é a
migrated.
estratégia da companhia? A gente vai continuar crescendo no
And so
3P,
what's the
mas
strategy? We're
voltado
going
para o
to
core.
continue to grow in
Esse a
3P,
gente
but
até
we're going to be focused
incentiva
more
o
on
Pro.
core.
Por quê?
So we've even
Pensando na estratégia
incentivized
de
this a
compra,
bit
se eu
because you can
comprava
imagine the
50
purchase
modelos de
strategy if we
geladeira, eu
were
não
buying
preciso comprar
50
50.
different
Eu posso
models
comprar
of
de um fornecedor, tá?
refrigerators. I don't
Você
have
vai
to
ter
buy
mais
50
de
to buy
30, hoje
from
tem
one
vários.
supplier.
Mas de um,
So
às vezes
now
tem
we have
10,
many.
que é onde eu ganho mais
But
dinheiro, ou
sometimes
às
you have
vezes
like
você pega um
10,
modelo que
whereas where
produziu
you're making
muito
more
bem
money, you can concentrate
e
volumes and
os
have very
outros eu
competitive
posso vender
conditions. So
3P.
with the others,
Então, na
I
loja,
could sell
o
3P.
vendedor tira o pedido,
So at the
entrega na
store,
casa
for
do
example,
cliente. Isso
let's
acontece.
file
O
the
nosso 3P,
rather
50%
order
já
and
era
deliver it
categoria
at the
core, caiu
customer's
para
house for
70% de
3P.
categoria
50% was already
relacionada ao
core
core.
categories, but
E, obviamente,
now
acessórios
of course,
das
we have
categorias
these
core, que a gente fala
accessories
de fones de ouvido, de
of the
capinhas, de
core
películas, tudo pode ser
categories, right?
3P,
When we talk
e que a
about
gente pode vender isso
earphones
como
and
3P.
all of this
O
to be
3P
3P, and we can
generalista,
sell it
a
as
gente também não vai
3P. A more
acabar com ele. A gente
generalist
tem
3P, of
bastante
course,
SKU.
we
O que a
won't
gente fez foi
end it, right?
parar
We have
de
a lot of
subsidiar.
we
A
stopped
gente
doing
investia em
was
Google,
stop
gastar,
subsidizing.
investir,
So
dar frete grátis,
investing
fazer
not too
condição comercial
much,
de produtos sem
providing
juros
free
de
freight,
forma
and performing
gratuita,
all these
isso não
conditions of
faz sentido.
installments with no
Agora, em parceria
interest,
com o seller, o
with the
seller
company
bancando,
paying for it
faz
doesn't make
sentido e a gente
sense,
não tem
right? So
problema com isso. Então, a gente está vendo até que o 3P tem possibilidade
we
de
have
crescimento.
seen
O terceiro
that
trimestre ainda
3P
cresceu.
has
Claro que tem um
possibilities for
efeito de
growth, and
migração, mas a
you can see
ideia
there's
nossa
also
não
this
é a
migration
gente
effect, but
realmente
our
ficar
idea is
investindo
not
bastante para crescer o 3P. Quando a gente pensa
investing
na nossa proposta de
too
valor,
much
é ser um
3P.
player
Consider
especialista nas
our value
categorias core,
proposition
que é
is about
referência
being a
nas categorias
specialist
core.
in
Então,
core
se nós somos o
categories.
maior vendedor
So
de
if we're the
televisão, de
biggest
celular, de
when it comes to
móvel, de
selling
linha branca
television,
e
cell
tudo, você
phones,
pega no offline, não tem
furniture,
tudo e nenhuma. Somando
and
nós tudo e nenhuma
when you look at the
online, a gente
offline,
fica
when
ali
you add all of
primeiro, às vezes cai
this,
para segundo um mês, volta para primeiro, tal, nessas categorias, e nós fizemos a primeiro constante. Isso aqui é nosso dever, ser referência, ter escala, ser
this is our
bastante
duty,
competitivo
right? To
e
be our
continuar ganhando core.
have
Seja
reference and
1P,
scale,
seja
being very
3P,
competitive. So
maximizando a geração de
whether
valor da
it's 1P
companhia,
or
sendo
3P,
3P era um tem capacity para
maximizing our
capital,
value
ele tem
generation.
algumas vantagens do ponto de
And
vista de
so we
ROIC,
have some
e que para
advantages
alguns
also when
itens
it
pode
comes
fazer
to ROIC,
sentido.
and for some
Consumir
items this could make
generalista, e como eu
sense.
tenho uma base de clientes
Most
gigante, 30 milhões
items,
de
since
clientes
you have
ativos,
a
100 milhões
huge
de clientes
customer
Bahia,
base, 30 million
ele vai
active
vender. Então, eu
customers,
continuo vendendo
then it's going
cerveja,
to sell.
continuo vendendo
So we
fralda,
continue
continuo
to
vendendo.
sell
Agora, sem
beer,
o
diapers, and
incentivo de
all,
Google. Posso ter um
but
investimento?
without
Posso.
an
Mas não é de coste que
incentive.
cabe lá.
Could I have
Então, se
investments?
meu comissionamento é
Yes, but it's
13%
been
com o
added
seller,
cost that I can
pô,
fit in.
vai me
So
custar
if my
com
commission is
produção, vai custar
13% of the
2,
seller,
3.
then my
Quanto eu posso
operation maybe
gastar para ter
costs
ainda uma
2
margem de
3. How
contribuição?
much can I
E aí você vai
spend
fazer,
to
não,
have a
depende, tem
contribution margin?
parcelamento? Não tem? Como é que
So it
é? O
depends,
frete?
right? Are you going to
Se
have
for serviço é
installments
desse
or
valor,
not?
custa um
What's the
pouquinho,
freight
eu
like?
ganho um pouquinho mais.
So when I work
Então,
on
aí me
pro
dá
forma, I
margem
make
para
a little
investir um
more,
pouquinho mais.
but
O fulfillment
the
tem crescido
margins to
bastante, como a gente
invest a little
colocou na
more.
nossa apresentação.
Fulfillment has
Pô, né,
grown
o
a lot,
fulfillment
so we consider this in our
multi-marketplace para a Bahia
presentation
tem crescido muito
about
e o
the
nosso fulfillment crescido
multi-marketplace.
bastante. Acho
And
que tem um ponto que eu não comentei aqui nas principais mensagens, né, mas assim, o
there's
nível de
one point I didn't
serviço
mention
nosso,
here, but the
tanto no
level of
1P quanto no
service when
3P,
it comes to
ele melhorou
1P
muito.
um,
Eu
improved a
convido
lot.
vocês, eu comento aqui com o senhor
So
informalmente, mas assim,
I
desde a
also
primeira vez que eu cheguei
mentioned
aqui, obviamente,
that
falei, agora tem que
ever
comprar
since
tudo
I
na Casa Bahia.
arrived,
Se quiser, tem que dar um
oh,
tempo
now
de
you have to
management.
buy
Tem que
everything
brigar,
at
viu,
Casas
Thiago?
Bahia.
No início tinha briga.
You
Quando
have to
falamos de
see what
abril,
you
maio,
can do.
tinha
But in the
briga.
beginning,
Quando você
people
olhava,
were
o preço era
fighting
muito
over it. In
diferente,
April and May,
prazo de
look,
entrega muito diferente.
prices were
Hoje não
very
é mais
different.
assim. Então, se vocês olharem
Deadlines for
assim, do
delivery
ponto de
were
vista
also
de
very different.
mix
So now it's not
e
like
de
they
nível
were
de
from the
serviço,
mixed
a
point
gente
of
está
view and level
bastante
of
competitivo.
service.
Só que do
We
ponto de vista
are
de
very
foco da
competitive,
companhia,
but
nosso
from a
investimento
focus
se
perspective in the
voltará
company,
para o
our
core da
investments
companhia, para as
are
categorias
going to be
core.
focused
O
on the
resto será
company's
mais
core
orgânico
and
e
these
pela nossa
categories. The rest
escala,
will be more
ele tende a
organic
continuar
and
existindo
considering
e
our
ter
scale,
algum crescimento,
it tends to
mas um
continue
crescimento
to
mais
exist and have a bit
orgânico.
of growth,
É
but
isso que a
it's
gente
going to
está
be
vendo.
a more normalized growth. And this is what we're seeing.
Não, excelente, super claro. Obrigada pelas
Excellent.
respostas.
Thank
Obrigado.
you. Very clear. Thank you,
Obrigado,
Danny.
Dani. Nossa próxima
Thank you.
pergunta é da Irma
Our next
Sgarz,
question
do
is
Goldman
from
Sachs.
Irma
Irma, por favor.
Sgarz from Goldman Sachs.
Não foi irmã, não.
Agora foi.
Oh,
Vocês
sorry.
estão
I
me
think
escutando? Sim.
we put in the wrong person.
Tá.
Okay, now it's
Obrigada por
Irma.
pegarem a minha pergunta. Eu
Great.
queria
Thank you for
perguntar
taking my
primeiramente sobre
question. I want to ask
a
about,
mudança
first of all,
na parceria em
on
cartão
the
co-branded.
shift of the
Vocês
partnership
acho
with
que
the
destacaram e
co-branded
explicaram no recado e
card.
usaram a curto prazo no release, mas eu queria entender um
So I
pouco
don't
o
talk
que
about
você
non-recurring in
pensaria
the short
sobre essa
term,
parceria mais para
but
frente
how are you
e
thinking
para
about this
eventuais
partnership
não sei,
and
gastos ou
possible
impactos
expenses
one-off,
or
talvez ainda no
impacts
quarto tri.
one-off
E,
in the fourth quarter
e a minha
still?
segunda
And
pergunta é só para falar um
my
pouco
second question is
sobre
just
o
about
crediário. Pelo que eu entendi pelos
the binoculars, but
comentários
what I
anteriores, vocês
saw and
estão
understood with the previous
ainda com uma
comments, you
postura
were
relativamente
still having
conservadora.
a
Eu vejo que
very
tem agora
relatively
maior
conservative approach,
flexibilidade.
and
Acho que
now
vocês
you
explicaram
have
isso
more
muito bem como
flexibility,
pedir.
and you explained this really
Mas pelo
well.
que eu entendi, vocês ainda estão focando
But
nas
by
classes
what
de
I
risco
understood, you're still
mais
focused on the risk
seguras.
categories that are a
Então,
little
eu
safer.
queria entender um pouco
So
esse momento
I
de
just want to
abrir apetite ao
understand
risco
about this
dentro
moment
do
you're in and this
crediário e também
risk
também o
appetite
balanço
within
entre
nicho
buy now, pay
totalmente
later.
co-branded e
Also,
crediário.
this
Sim, são
balance
públicos um
between
pouco diferentes.
both products with
Obrigada.
branded,
Obrigado, hein?
co-branded, and buy now,
Vamos
pay later. I know it's different
começando
publics.
pelo
Okay,
cartão,
thanks,
né?
Irma. Thanks.
O cartão, quando a gente
First,
fez um
about the
contrato novo,
card,
né, feito no final do ano
we had
passado,
worked on this
e
new
ele tem já uma
contract,
perspectiva de meta e
and there's a
resultados.
perspective
Até a
for
gente
targets
colocar
and
on track,
results. until we consider, we put this on track, we're still a little bit lower than the estimate. So when you consider the performance for the third quarter, we understood that it would make sense to work on this provision. But if you look at the volumes for October, there are already numbers that are a lot stronger than what we had done before. So we had this second generation platform. We improved the process of launch new card with the Elo Casas Bahia Fácil card. It's also market interest. And we have some levers that really show that we'll get back to the target. So look at this. This maybe even is excessive conservatism, but I want everyone to look at the results for the second, third, first quarter and have the risk of having to do this up ahead. But we prefer to have this provision because of the reversal of this provision. Look at the fourth quarter, then we want to make this position. So there could be some forecasts, some provisions, but maybe not as big. But we're working on not having to have this finish line for 2024. We won't have this, and we'll be operating with our goals and our plan for the company is to really be able to cover this and work towards a reversal. But to be very conservative here, we're still trying to keep what we mentioned in this. So it's quite simple, right? I'd rather correct this in 2023 to start off with possible upside potential. So we're this plan that doesn't allow us to have mistakes. We can only get it right. So that's why we're a little more conservative. But this is related to your second question. We talk about the Grupo later. We understand that there's a lot of opportunities for growth. We know how to do things well. We provide credit to a profile that's not very normal and to receive credit. So this is differential. And being able to control this, but we'll always be very careful. I'll always have a lot of discipline. So with credit, you can never joke around. And although we have this team that is technically dominating this credit topic, we have a really good model, we have loyalty from our customers. And this is very unique. Just look at the performance of the buy now pay later versus other credit products in the market. But we want to be conservative and we want to grow in our ratings. I'd rather have growth targets a little less aggressive, but not have any risks than the opposite. So the appetite for risks is low and appetite for good business, of course, is always high. Okay, thank you, Bruno. Perfect, thanks. Thank you, Irma. Our next question is from Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for the question. I'm curious about the e-commerce behavior around the stores you've closed, any effect it's had on GMV, and based on this, if it changes your view about what the right store count more or less could be longer term. And then second, just quickly on 3P take rate, we saw it continue to move up in the quarter. So curious your view on how much room there is to increase take rates from here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew.
Obrigado, Andrew. Vou responder e você tem a tradução.
So, falando do B2C, né, do 1P,
so about B2C and 1P related to the closing of the store, I don't see a connection in the drop of volumes from B2C and 1P related to the closing of the stores. Closing of stores is something that's very one-off and it can impact the but in the GMV of the physical stores, brick and mortars, of course, you lose this, but this is kind of offset by the stores that we had close to the stores. We don't migrate everything, but we do migrate from 40 to 60% of the store. And so, from a margin perspective, it made sense to have these stores closed too. The other ones we're already mapping out. There's some that we think really make sense, but others just I want to clarify our plan about, and there's a recovery. So about the second question, we understand there is an opportunity for improvements, not only in negotiations and increasing the take rates, but also offering services. So when you take rate, this should consider an increase. And so normally I charge this up. And so with fulfillment, it tends to increase when I add more services. I can increase this. From a market and competitive perspective, we understand we're at a level
ideal, mas é um bom patamar que
That's
permite algum
too
crescimento
ideal, not
com
ideal
margem
yet, but it does
para o
allow for
seller
some
e
growth
com
with
rentabilidade para nós,
margins
tá?
for the sellers and
O
profitability
crescimento
for us.
do
So the growth
T3P, eu sei que não
of
estava tão
the
direcionado, né, mas ele
3P
ajuda no
is, I
crescimento
know
da
this is
receita,
not that
porque ele é um
directed,
fator, né? Se a
but it
receita está
helps with the
crescendo,
growth of
significa que
revenue because it's
não
affecting
tem
the
como
revenue
ele estar ainda
story.
competitivo.
That means that the
Se o
take rate that's
GMV
so
começa a
competitive.
sofrer muito,
If
significa que
GMV
talvez eu
starts
esteja
suffering a bit, that
cobrando
means I'm
muito.
a little
A gente
bit, I
enxerga que
might
tem
be charging too
espaço,
much.
principalmente
So
migrando
we
essas
know that there's
categorias para o
room
3P e alguns
to
itens, alguns
migrate these
SKUs do
categories
core
to 3P
que faz
and some
sentido migrar para o 3P
items of
e
the
que podem
core that
maximizar a
make
receita
sense
do
to
3P.
migrate in the community,
Alguns deles
maximize our
têm até
3P
comissionamento
revenue.
acima da média.
And so some of
E aí,
them
dependendo
the
do quanto
commissions
eu
that are above
conseguir fazer essa
average.
estratégia 1P versus 3P,
And
eu posso sim
depending
ter,
on
em
how I
alguns
can do
momentos,
this,
um take rate um pouco
I
maior.
could
Mas
have
não é parte do
a take
plano,
rate.
não é uma alavanca estruturada onde a gente vê uma
What's
oportunidade material na
It's
modificação
not
do
a
take
part of a
rate.
structured plan where we see
Thank
like a
you, Andrew.
material change in the
Obrigado.
take rate of the company. Okay, thank you very much, Andrew.
Nossa próxima pergunta vai ser do Eric, do Santander.
Our next
Eric,
question is from
por
Eric
favor.
at Santander. Please, you may proceed.
Boa tarde, pessoal. Obrigado por pegar nossas perguntas. Aqui
Hey
do
guys,
nosso
good
lado,
afternoon. Thanks for
eu
taking my
olhar um pouquinho
questions.
também
On
junto
our
com o
side,
lado do 3P
I want
e
to
para
look
explorar
at
um pouco
3P
mais
as
dessa
well and
estratégia, né, de
explore this a bit
monetização,
more in our strategy
pensando em termos de
organization.
sellers, né, que vocês querem atrair,
When it comes to
né,
the sellers, you want
vencer
to
a
track
conversão,
um,
numa dinâmica, né, entre trazer mais sellers
considering a
grandes ou sellers
dynamic with
pequenos
more
e aqui dentro,
bigger
né,
sellers
pensando
or smaller
estruturalmente
sellers.
nisso, onde talvez, como talvez se continuar se diferenciando aí nos
Or
sellers
if you
talvez
would
menores,
continue
né, onde
to
vocês consigam um
differentiate
take rate
yourself
maior,
with a smaller
por
bit of higher
trazer
take,
esses sellers ou também
continue to
aumentando,
bring
né,
in
a conversão desses sellers
sellers, also
dentro da
increasing the
plataforma de
conversion of the
vocês versus
sellers in
outras
this platform
plataformas. Obrigado.
versus your platform
Ótima
or
pergunta,
others.
Eric. Na nossa visão, a
Great
gente já
question,
tem um
Eric.
número
In
de
our
sellers
vision,
bastante
we
grande,
already have the amount of
já tem
sellers
muitos
that's quite
SKUs e
significant.
muitos
So we have a lot
sellers,
of
e a
SKUs
gente
and a lot of
entende que, na
sellers.
verdade, tem uma
But we
margem até de
understand that
melhora de conversão
actually there's
se você trabalha
an improvement in the
mais
conversion, even if
disciplina
you work with
na
more
quantidade de
discipline
sellers e a quantidade de
in the
oferta
amount
pelo
of
mesmo
sellers
item.
and the amount of
Então, ter
offerings for the
apenas as
same item.
melhores ofertas é
So
ótimo, é
having
melhor do
only
que
the best
todas as ofertas,
offerings is better than having all of
principalmente
them.
olhando para o nível de
And
serviço.
when you
Nós
look at
não
the level of
vamos
service,
arriscar a
especially. So
reputação da
we're
companhia
not going to
com
risk the
sellers
company's
que geram
reputation again
custo, porque
with
você tem que estar
sellers that
bancando
generate costs because you have
eventuais
to
erros de
pay off
operação, né? Então, quando você pega,
possible
se você é uma
operational
plataforma muito
mistakes. So
generalista,
when you
você
are a
acaba
platform
investindo
that's too
bastante
generalist,
em,
you
tá,
have
se
to
der um problema,
invest a
você paga
lot,
logo e
and
resolve
if
esse
there's any
negócio.
problem,
Então, não é a nossa ideia,
you
então
just
naturalmente a
pay
gente é
for
menor,
it and
o
have to
3P
solve
sim,
it.
um 3P
So
mais
that's not our idea. Our
concentrado,
appetite
um
is a little
3P de
smaller, and
alta
we'll have 3P
qualidade,
that's more
competitivo
concentrated and
e que
high
cresce
quality,
organicamente e
and
não
it
com
grows
investimento. Então, o
organically
investimento
and
do
not with
core,
investments.
ele
So the
acaba
investments of the
respingando
core
para o 3P, porque
being
para o
to
cliente
kind
ele
of
não sabe bem o que é
impact
o
3P
3P.
because for
Então,
customers, they
quando
don't
ele
really know what 3P is.
pesquisou lá, pô, quero
So when they
comprar
go
uma
in and
geladeira,
research, I
ele
want
abre
to
ali a
buy a
geladeira, ele vê o
refrigerator,
site.
they
E ele vê o
see
modelo de geladeira, mas ele buscou lá, não,
and
quero uma um pouco
he sees
maior,
this
2,50,
model of a
tem um pouco,
refrigerator and he sees,
automaticamente ele
look,
vai ver no 3P, vai comprar,
automatically he's
e
going to
grande
see this
parte
on
das vezes eu
3P.
vou fazer a
He'll
entrega
buy
para ele,
this, and
mas é um
quite
3P.
frequently I'm going to be delivering
Isso
to him,
vale
but
para
it's
televisão,
a
isso
3P.
vale para celular,
And
isso
this is
vale para
worth
todas as categorias
this
core
value
que
to
nós temos.
television
Inclusive em imóveis,
and
onde existem muitos SKUs
and
e
so
que faz sentido ter o
as well
3P.
as
Eu acho que a grande questão,
properties.
né, no
Sorry, where
online,
there's a lot of
um P e
furniture,
3P,
and
você
then it makes
costuma
sense to have
fazer uma conta
3P. So
de
online, 1P and
mobilizando
3P kind of
capital.
mixes up a lot.
Essa
When
margem
you
adicional de
have
1P,
fixed
ela
capital
paga
and
o
you have this
capital
additional
mais logística,
margin,
mais
it
isso,
pays off
ou é
capital plus
melhor fazer
logistics and all of
3P?
this.
Então,
There's
acho
a
que
better to
o
do
nosso
3P.
foco aqui é muito
So
mais em
our main
categorias
focus
core
here is a lot
do
more
que em 1P
category
versus
based
3P.
in our
1P
core
versus 3P
categories
é uma
than
conta
1-3
matemática
versus
simples de
3P.
qual que é o comissionamento
This
que
is
me dá
just
aqui, qual que é o
about
custo e qual é a margem que você me
what
dá aqui, qual
commission
que é o
you have,
custo. E aí a
what's the
gente mix. Na
cost,
loja física,
and then we
obviamente, aí o
optimize
P
this in the physical
acelera muito a
stores.
conversão, então
Then
muda
of
muito a
course
conversão para a
you
gente
have to
poder
still
realmente
accelerate
maximizar a
it,
nossa performance.
and
E
that
acho que é onde
changes
é a
to
fortaleza da
maximize
companhia. A gente olha
performance,
lá
and
produtividade por
that's where
loja,
our
nosso
strength
desempenho por
is.
loja,
So
olha
when
as
you see our
métricas de
productivity
eficácia que vem
stores,
crescendo, realmente a gente
um,
tem performado
and
muito bem e
so
com oportunidade de
we've been
continuar
performing
evoluindo
a lot
bastante.
better, and we have possibilities to continue to evolve a lot.
Perfeito, Renato. Obrigado aí pela resposta. resposta.
Okay, thank you.
Então,
Perfect.
a gente não tem mais
Okay.
perguntas, mas tem
We have no
ponto
other
do
questions
Andrew.
now, but
Se eu
there's
puder
one
só
point from Andrew that maybe you
responder,
could
sobre a
finish
questão do
answering,
futuro
which
do
is
grupo,
about
também.
the
E
store
aí a
network in the
gente
long
pode
term.
fazer as considerações finais e encerrar. Tá?
And then you can
Muito
have the
obrigado.
comments and
No âmbito
finish.
do
Okay,
futuro,
thank you.
obrigado, Andrew.
Well,
falando
the
sobre
store
abrir lojas,
footprint, thank
a
you.
gente, no longo prazo, né, a gente espera sim
In the
crescer
long
o
term,
número de
we
lojas. A gente
expect to
entende que o mercado
grow
como um
the
todo
footprint of
tem um
stores.
crescimento
We
um
understand
pouco
that the
maior
market
no
as a whole
online,
has some
mas
growth that's
considerando
even a
as
little greater in
fortalezas
the
da
online.
companhia
But if you
e
look at
como
the
a gente
strong
sabe
points
trabalhar a loja
and
e as
how we
oportunidades que a
know how
gente
to
tem no
work with the
mercado offline,
stores,
mesmo o market share no mercado offline, o market share nosso é
if you
muito
look at
grande,
the
perto de
market
30%,
share in the
especialmente
offline market, it's
regiões
pretty big.
fora do
But
Sudeste, a gente tem 12,
if you look at
enquanto
regions
aqui
out of
tem
the
mais de
southeast, we're at
40.
12,
Então,
and here
a
it's a lot more than
oportunidade de
35 or 40.
crescimento
So the opportunity for
do
growth
nosso market share no
in our market
Centro-Oeste, no
share
Norte, no Nordeste do
and the
país é
Midwest
muito
region, North
grande,
and Northeast,
inclusive
is
abrindo
really big.
lojas. Então a gente
And
entende,
actually
quando a gente fala lá do último
opening
slide
up
nosso,
stores.
lá que está na
So
apresentação do vídeo,
when we look
a
at our
gente tem a
last slide,
oportunidade de abrir bastante loja
we
física. A
see
gente
that
tem
there's an
200
opportunity to
cidades
open up a
mapeadas
lot
que
of physical
deveria
stores.
ter
We
uma
have
loja da Casas Bahia.
200 cities
A
mapped
gente
out
só não vai abrir
that
isso
should have a
agora,
Casas
porque a
Bahia
gente só vai
store, and we're just not
começar
going to open
a
this
expansão
now because we're
depois
only
que o
going to
nosso
start
fluxo de caixa
expansion
estiver
once our cash
superior ao
flow
pagamento de juros, ou
is
seja,
a
estiver
lot
gerando caixa para a
higher
companhia.
than
Aí
is
esse
actually
adicional
generating
caixa eu
cash for the
posso sim
company.
investir na
Then
abertura
this additional
de
cash I
lojas.
can, of
Então
course,
isso deve
invest in
acontecer mais lá para o
opening
fim de
stores.
24, início de
And
2025,
so
onde a gente começa a expandir
this is in the beginning of
lojas. Isso
2025
sem
when we
contar,
start
obviamente, com
expanding
um ajuste no
stores.
mercado
And
macro, né?
this,
Se o
of
mercado
course,
melhora,
is
a gente
not just
recupera muito
doing
mais rápido
macro
e aí pode antecipar
transformations,
alguma
right?
coisa. Mas cenário base,
And
a
so
gente
then, of
começa a
course, we
expandir
can
mais lá
anticipate
para
this. So the
2025.
base
Mas
scenario,
a
if
companhia deve
we
crescer um pouco
expand
mais no
in
offline do que no
2025,
online,
the
no que olhar
company
no médio e
should
longo
grow a little
prazo,
more on
assim,
the
de 3
offline
a
than on
5
the
anos, um
online if
crescimento
you look at
maior
the mid and long term,
no offline.
where
E a
our
gente está
growth
preparando, a
is
gente está
mostly
falando,
in the
obviamente, de
offline.
longo
So
prazo para a
we're
companhia. Então,
preparing a
já está em
plan for the long
discussão,
term,
já tivemos um bom
and this is
alinhamento
already under
possível nas
discussion. We
alavancas de
have
longo
pretty
prazo
good
e médio
alignment
prazo da
at the
companhia.
level with the
Então,
levers
a
in the mid to
transformação
long
de curto
term.
prazo ela é essencial
And
e a
so
gente não
the
está procurando
transformation in the
trazer
short
ainda
term
para
is
longo prazo
essential, and
para
we're not
garantir
trying
muito
to bring
foco
this long
na
term yet
transformação do
because
nosso
we really
fluxo de
want to
caixa no
guarantee
curto
the
e no curto
focus
prazo.
and
A gente entrando
transformation
no
of our
segundo
cash flow.
semestre de 24, a gente
As we
precisa
enter
sim
the
dar um
second quarter of
desclose do plano
2024,
estratégico
we
da
should have
companhia
some
e
disclosure on the
todas as
strategic
alavancas
plan
que a
of the
gente
company,
enxerga para
all
maximizar a
of the
geração de
levers we
valor que vão
see to
possibilitar a gente
maximize
chegar na nossa
value
ambição de ser
that will allow
referência em
us to reach
ROIC
our
e
ambition
geração
of
de valor
being
no
a
mercado.
reference in
E
ROIC
consciência
and
de
in
que para ser
cash rich in
referência
the
de geração de
market. We
valor, a
are
gente precisa
aware
ter
that
um
to
ROIC
become a
robusto,
reference,
geração
we
de
must have a
caixa
robust ROIC,
e crescimento.
robust cash generation,
Então, nós não
and
estamos
growth.
desprezando essa
So
terceira variável.
we're not
Nós apenas
giving up on the third
empurramos essa
variable.
terceira
We are
variável
just
lá para
pushing this third
2025 para a gente
element
poder
a little
discutir as
more towards
alavancas de
2025
crescimento
so we can discuss the
após
growth
a
levers
transformação do fluxo de caixa da
after
companhia,
our
que a gente está
transformation of
vivendo
the
já
company's
outro
cash
momento.
flow.
Então,
And
de
we're
novo,
already
aproveito
experiencing
aqui
this
para
other
agradecer
moment.
a
So
participação de
once again, I
todos.
want to thank you
Quem
all
não
for your
viu os vídeos, o
participation.
material
If you have
convida a
not seen the
assistir,
videos and all the
está
material,
bastante
I invite you
completo
all to
e,
watch.
obviamente, ficamos
It's
todos à
really
disposição,
cool
a nossa
and
equipe de RI,
full of
todos nós
interesting
aqui,
information. And of
para
course, our IR
esclarecer
team is
eventuais dúvidas.
available as well
Muito obrigado a todos,
to
um ótimo dia
clarify
e vamos que vamos.
questions.
Black
So
Friday
thank you
está
all very
aí, vamos
much.
comprar, viu, gente?
Day.
Tem condição
Black Friday's
imperdível de
there, and
escolher.
let's go.
Black já está na
We have
tela. Vamos que vamos. Um
incredible
abraço.
conditions and prices. Let's buy a lot, okay? See you.